Yes, so I believe we are live now on this session where we are going to be talking about advancing evidence-based practice and evaluation in BV, CV, radicalization, and crime prevention as well. And I will be kickstarting. I am joined here by my wonderful colleagues of the Indeed project, Kai and Rhiannon, who will also be speaking after me. I will just very quickly share my screen. Hopefully I manage it because it is my first time using here the platform, but I believe that you can already see my screen. If not, please do confirm. And if you stop seeing it at any point, please do let me know. So first of all, my name is Sara Afonso. I work at IPS Innovative Prison Systems in Portugal, and I would first like to say it is a pleasure to be here sharing the screen with my wonderful colleagues from the Indeed project to carry out this presentation on the results of a research that we actually conducted within the Indeed project towards exploring existing capacity building approaches in the design and evaluation of PVE, CVE, and radicalization initiatives, as well as associated needs and gaps. And this research actually serves as a baseline for the development of the project's training approach. So just to give you here a brief overview of what we have done to reach the results, I will talk about in this presentation. We started here with a desk research report to identify existing training approaches in the design and evaluation of PVE, CVE, and radicalization, as well as other crime prevention initiatives at the European and international level. Here, we identified 30 resources, both scientific and non-scientific, but the scope had to be broadened here, as I said, to crime prevention in general, due to the lack of information on the specific topic regarding PVE, CVE, and radicalization. This was complemented by 26 in-depth interviews and 14 national level workshops conducted with practitioners from the prison and probation settings, governmental actors, law enforcement agents, and also academics and researchers that work on this field. And this was done in order to meet the goal here of providing a comprehensive analysis of identified and explored training and learning tools, but also gaps and needs and standards for the evaluation and intervention design of PVE, CVE, and radicalization initiatives, which is the focus of our Indeed project. The triangulation of methods that I just mentioned in the previous slide allowed us to overcome most hindrances faced with utilizing only one research method, such as, for example, inaccurate data, biases, or overly research-oriented results. However, we face still some methodological limitations, which we thought it would be also of added value to present to you here, such as the scarce literature on the field that I already mentioned of designing and evaluating initiatives in this particular area, difficulties in meeting the target groups, hindrances in consistently analyzing data from different sources and methods, as well as here the implementation of mainly qualitative analysis. Nonetheless, the results that we obtained were guaranteed to be up-to-date, rigorous, and most importantly, reflect practitioners' needs, considerations, and requirements, which is what we require for the next steps in our project. Going now to the actual results of our research, and after analyzing all of the information that we collected, we reached three main conclusions, which we bring you here on this slide. So the first conclusion was that the underdeveloped state of the trainings that include design and evaluation of PVE, CVE, and radicalization initiatives, since most practitioners that we talked to had never received any training in this field. The second conclusion that we bring you here, and which was very highly stressed by the literature as well as those that we spoke to, all trainings must be tailor-made according to previously identified needs. Lastly, and also here to mention that it was very often highlighted by the practitioners, training initiatives must be dynamic, thus including practical activities that allow for know-how exchange. Now, Amy here to provide an overview of the current context of the training in design and evaluation of PVE, CVE, and radicalization initiatives. We see that for evaluations to have the necessary rigor and quality, the competencies and expertise of those who conduct them must be fomented. However, this is not the case, particularly since these practitioners lack the very basic technical skills and resources to do so. And this can here be explained, and it is what we found in our research, by the lack of adequate training opportunities for evaluators, since, as I already mentioned, trainings in this field are actually often excluding these topics related to designing an initiative and evaluating an initiative. With this scenario in mind, we concluded then that it is fundamental to address existing needs and lacks, and this can only be done through holistic trainings, as just through capacity building can the utmost added value and relevance of evaluation be fully ensured. Going now here to the actual needs and gaps of practitioners, and these are the main ones, so we collected others, but these are the three key ones that were mostly mentioned by the practitioners that were involved in our interviews and the national workshops we conducted in the design and evaluation of PVE, CVE, and radicalization initiatives. Practitioners firstly had very little knowledge, including basic know-how in the field, referring often to lack of knowledge in the prevention and countering of violent extremism and radicalization itself. This comes in hand with the insufficient knowledge on conducting evaluation, also in very basic terms. So what is evaluation? What are the benefits of evaluation? What are the indicators of success? And how to actually conduct an evaluation process. Lastly, here, still in the terms of gaps in competences, practitioners identified needs for adjacent skills, such as critical thinking, problem solving, risk assessment, and multi-agency cooperation. And here it is quite interesting, actually, and we would like to highlight that despite practitioners actually having little knowledge and experience in this area of designing and evaluating initiatives, they were able to identify these additional skills as being important to conduct evaluation and as a need that they actually have. So they were quite aware of these adjacent skills that go beyond evaluation itself and identified that they did not have these, and these were a necessity. Now, from the research that we conducted, we were also able to outline some recommended good practices here for training and capacity building in this field. And in this sense, we recommend to create opportunities to gather practitioners, policymakers, as well as experts to create enriching opportunities for know-how exchange, which we saw before that were considered by practitioners as key and very important. And these should be complementary to the training that is provided. Further, evaluation tools must be included as complementary materials to the trainings. Excuse me, so the practitioners already are able to see what an evaluation tool looks like and how to actually use it. Another recommendation that we have here is to follow a train of trainers approach, and this was actually something that was quite mentioned, in order to ensure that the know-how reaches as many practitioners as possible. Before the training, and as already was mentioned, the profiles of trainees should also be outlined and their needs should be adequately assessed in order to be able to tailor it as much as possible. Another important aspect that we have here and that we recommend is to allow for continuous feedback, which should then be used to fine-tune the training initiatives. Moreover, the focus should not be only here on sharing good practices, but also on lessons learned, because practitioners also want to know what they should not do and what has gone wrong before, so that they are not wasting or dedicating efforts to something that will simply not work. Lastly, it is also here relevant to involve external stakeholders from fields other than PVE, CVE, and radicalization, and this is in order to ensure a comprehensive and cross-sectoral approach of the trainings, which will then result in a holistic evaluation. And here is my final slide to end this presentation. We would like to leave you here with some next steps, which are already being considered in the training approach that the Indeed project is developing. Firstly, we concluded that it is important to build upon and maximize already existing practices and materials, whether it is in the field of PVE, CVE, and radicalization, or in this case, in the field of crime prevention in general. And this is in order to avoid duplication of work, as well as enhanced know-how that has already been implemented before. And so we know that it is of good quality and that it actually works. Then we also suggest to include Indeed's evidence-based evaluation model and the tool in the training itself, following what was mentioned in a previous slide of being important to include actual tools. As seen, trainings must also be holistic, tailored, clear, and innovative, as well as translated to the target group's language in order to enhance their engagement and comprehension. Then continuous feedback must also be ensured at all times, to then the training to then be fine-tuned accordingly to practitioners' considerations and expectations. Here, the possibility of continuous training through the curricula that is developed was very much stressed actually by the practitioners, as well as the importance of having a cascade training approach through a TOT course, like we already mentioned, overcoming any limitations in training capabilities. Lastly, here, two main points to point out. Trainings implemented must be included in an online and in-person component, which should be dominated by a practical learning by doing approach that allows for dynamic know-how development. And that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you very much. And I apologize in advance for my voice, but I am a little bit ill, so hopefully you were able to understand me well. Thank you, and I will give now the word to my colleagues to continue here this session.
Sara, thank you for such a superb presentation and bringing together what was truly a tremendous amount of work in that, what is important to point out, essentially a baseline study for looking at what is the state of the field and doing an evaluation to understand the state of the field of evaluation in PVE, CVE, or of evaluation training before going into designing training. So really being able to use an informed evidence and needs-based approach to then guide the further work in the project. With that, I'd like to hand over to Rhiannon Williams, also one of our colleagues and in the team in the training package of Indeed. Please, Rhiannon.
Thanks very much, Kai, and thanks to you, Sarah, for that really great base level survey. And I'm also slightly voice failing today, so I'm going to follow on from you in both ways. Okay, so as Kai said, my name is Rhiannon Williams, and I'm from the Bremen Ministry of Justice and Constitution in Germany. We're one of the smallest, in fact, federal state in Germany, and we are partners in the Indeed project, and for good reason, as we will find out shortly. We have put ourselves down for the training package because we really think that this benefits both the people that we have frontline working within the prison and probation services in Bremen in Germany, and also ministerial level policy and decision makers to be involved in the European projects, and specifically where we see gaps in knowledge and in training, such as evaluation and evidence-based practice. So my aim is to link with Sarah's excellent presentation of the results of the needs and gaps analysis within Indeed, and to perhaps contextualize it a little bit with why and how we will proceed in developing the curriculum and in ultimately piloting what we have to our modules for Indeed. We, within the context of Bremen Prison Probation Service, do a lot of different types of training, as well as our basic training, which is a 2-year program for prison officers and slightly less for probationers. But on top of that, we offer a whole range of in-house training, which is in the context of professional development and is not obligatory unless you want to progress to higher levels, of course. And it is that which we are hoping that this Indeed training package will somehow fit into daily practice. But it is a challenge for us because even with study days and 10 days training per year given to you as part of your package of being a prison officer, the uptake of training is low with us currently as professional development. And we have to acknowledge that even before we start to think about how we're going to implement it within our system. And there are different reasons for that. And part of the reasons already been responded to by Sarah, and as Kai said, making the training relevant by doing a needs analysis is a massive and really positive first step in really identifying where people feel they ought to be learning and how they feel their job could improve in specific directions, and responding to that instead of whatever plan we have here on the top level. So even when we offer fantastic pan-European opportunities to learn with peers in different disciplines, in the police or probation service or the NGO, the broad voluntary sector, in criminal justice, it's still difficult for us to motivate people. And we need to recognize that there are some reasons why people choose not to go for further training options, and they might be because they are not feeling confident in their own setting within their discipline, or they have worries like language abilities. This runs throughout whatever we do here. We have to acknowledge that most people will have given up English when they stopped high school, or shortly even before. So it's a difficult place to start if you want to have conversations at this level. And it's not always obvious to people on the front line that learning from their peers, especially their peers within transnationally, is going to make their lives better or more effective on a day-to-day basis. So it is our job as training providers to perhaps not just make the training relevant to them within their context, but also convince them that somehow learning and exchange will help them within their professional lives and make them more effective in their daily jobs. So moving on to building institutional and organizational capacity, again, going back to Sarah's point about training the trainers, this was a big learning point for the Indeed project, and it's something that we fully endorse within the Bremen Prison Probation Service. We have recently trained 2 trainers as multipliers of training sessions within the context of the prison, one within context of prison, one within probation. And that's helped us to push new thinking and a change in practice, and to manage the change in practice across the 600 people who work for our organization. But it's not just training them. You need to acknowledge that they need time out of their day and away from security duties to organize the training, to get the participants, to motivate them to think that this training is going to be relevant to their everyday lives, and then to do the training and to follow up, because training is an ongoing process, and you need to respond to the feedback loop, as we've said. So training the trainers alone is not enough, but it's part of a process of mainstreaming new initiatives. We also agree that it's really important, and has been hugely important to us here on the ground, to get outside support in the form of outside training service providers, or within the context of our PV, CV, and de-radicalization initiatives. It is an NGO. Germany, as anybody from Germany here probably knows, has a really excellent funding stream called Democracy Alive, or Lives, and actually sets the NGOs in the lead of this field of initiative. In the justice sector, that means that we take the back seat, while for us here in Bremen, Legato takes the lead. Legato are a counselling centre which offer systemic exit counselling, and also they provide specialist training in order to deal with religiously motivated radicalization within different detention settings. So they have brought with them into Bremen Prison Probation Service a lot of innovative and broad training knowledge, which we previously had no access to, and this has been hugely beneficial to us. So any exchange inside, outside, as Sarah said, doesn't have to be within exactly the same field. It could be also mental health, drug support, or a whole range of different issues which are well documented within the detention system, which will improve the chances of rehabilitation and reintegration during their time in prison and on release. And thirdly, we want to, and this is a bigger one than we perhaps at first recognize, somehow mainstream the idea of professional development, especially for people who are working in the front line. This means somehow recognizing the value and the time and the dedication which goes into taking the first steps, perhaps outside your daily life comfort zone and into learning something new, or into formalizing some learning that you have already from the job, perhaps just learning the theory behind your current practice. There are a whole range of ways that we use to get this, to support people to get this validation and recognition from professional development. And we will use, when we come to pilot, the Indeed training as well. But we've also learned in our travels about other systems in different countries, such as the prison service in Romania, which has a point system which annually tots up your proactive engagement with education and training activities during the year, and for which you are awarded and then you're bumped onto the next year. So it's a nice way of acknowledging that you have been proactive and you got involved, or even simply, without a huge framework and structure of a point system, making sure that the line managers of your frontline officers know that they are the ones who promote learning and training opportunities. They are the ones who must consistently say, you have 10 days study leave. Come on, what would you like to do? How would you like to spend this? Or and this also in the context of staffing situations, which are often very tense, and it's up to the line manager also to get cover for those people when they're absent. So there's a balancing act, definitely, but they are unfortunately the point where it needs to start to change. We did a piece of research within the context of some of our project work, and had responses from 700 or 800 prison officers across Europe, who told us that whatever training they did, however they had engaged professionally in learning about being a prison officer and the wider criminal justice service, they felt more motivated to stay in their job and more aligned to their personal duties and journey as somebody who works with people in the criminal justice system, and therefore with this prison system or probation system's mission of either rehabilitation or reintegration. So this was really interesting for us. We put components of rehabilitation and reintegration into all our training, but just any training, just feeling valued and feeling pushed along a pathway will help people to understand their role in the organization, and to understand their value, and to keep them on board, to stop them from getting the 7-year itch, as we all do in all of our jobs. Finally, and this is the really big question, the top-down approach to building national and sectoral capacity is something which we will also think about in implementing Indeed's training. We have a really strong feeling that in the Bremen Ministry of Justice that we need to support our staff to help be part of this European project of standardization of security and social reintegration measures. They must be trained so that they are able to work in parallel with these different cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral training initiatives that are coming along. And the example which I have today is about the framework decision 947, which is to do with cross-border probation standardization, which is a really fantastic tool and completely in line with all current research, which says that getting a person back to perhaps their home environment or an environment in which they feel they have the language, the cultural knowledge, and everything else is better for their chances of getting back in touch with family, getting a job, and looking after themselves in a way which they might not be able to do if they land in probation service in a country where they committed the crime. However, it is hugely underused. Because actually probation officers and prison officers on the ground really aren't clear perhaps about what it is, when to offer it to people, when to make it known that it is perhaps a possibility to them. They are disconcerted by the additional skills they're going to need in order to call up a Bulgarian drug service and ask if they fulfill certain conditions that a German judge will require in order to give the probation license out, or if they're going to indeed be able to prove, in fact, where they live in Bulgaria and how you do that. They just don't feel prepared to take that responsibility, which is fully understandable. And here we think it's up to the European Union and the national member states of Europe then to fix this by funding national and transnational sectoral capacity in line with these really great legal tools that we have to promote standardization. And I have talked enough, Kai and Sarah, I think, about this current implementation period, and I will round up. Unless there's anything else I have to say.
Rhiannon, thank you so much. I think that was wonderful and a very rich presentation and really bringing in from hands-on experience. I'd like to thank Sara and Rhiannon for the presentations so far, and also working together with them on the training and capacity building focus within the Indeed project. I'd like to bring up some of the broader discussions that have also come forward in our work and in the field more broadly around how do we actually build capacity, or what we call performance competence, the ability to do what you need to do, where you need to do it, when you need to, with the reality and the actual tools and what you have to hand. And what I think is important for us, the issues that were identified by Sara when looking at the state of training in the field really helps us to understand some of the critical points in that, for example, there really isn't that much training at the moment. Many people haven't been trained, haven't been exposed to it, and that quite obviously affects competencies and capabilities for it. But I think we also should be looking together as a field at how do we approach capacity building. If our aim is to build our competencies, to build our capabilities as a field, to take in learning, first to do evaluation in ways that we can identify key evidence of what works, what doesn't work, how and why. And then we want to go from the identification of that evidence and connect that with building our capabilities as individual practitioners, as institutions and agencies or organizations, and as a field. Then training plays a critical role, and it isn't enough. And one of the things that we need to recognize is the 2017 EU policy guidelines on adult vocational education and training state explicitly on the first page is training doesn't build capacity. So someone who has been working in training for over 25 years, and I find trainings can be amazing. They can inspire, they can open new ways of seeing things, they can advance our understanding. Trainings can be a powerful boost to confidence, to knowledge, to learning, and when done well, also to practical skills that can help us in our work. But how many of us would put the lives of those we love or our own in the hands of a surgeon who has only gone through a 5-day training or a 2-day training? So training in and of itself isn't enough. If we want to become someone who's working in the probation services, a law enforcement officer, a professional working from community-based organizations or NGOs, that's often backed up by a lot of education. It can be going through university, it can be vocational and hands-on training, but this is one of the first points, that it's very good to develop, as is being done and as we're working on together in the Indeed project, specific trainings for those who are already practitioners and those who are working in the field. But we should also take a note from the fields of medicine and many others, and we need to connect this content on evidence-based evaluation and how to do evaluation and how to then design practice, also drawing upon evidence, experience, and expertise. And we need to bring that into the formation programs. We need to bring that into universities, so that right away when people are learning anything in social work, in any area, in high school or in university, we're understanding the importance of what yesterday Michael Quinn-Patton spoke to as evaluative thinking. We're understanding the need to build in collaborative spaces to learn and reflective practices. So one, if you're trying to introduce evaluation to people when they're already practitioners in the field, then you're doing it too late. We need to do that. We need to improve the tools for that. But if we want to improve as a field our ability to do evidence-based evaluation and evidence-based practice, we need to go earlier and also to bring it into universities. Another component is, again, training in and of itself isn't enough. Someone can go through training and they can gain new understanding of what it means to do evaluation, why evaluation is important, what evidence-based evaluation is, and the different approaches and methods that can be used for it. And they can even gain deep insight on how to work with evidence to improve our interventions, our processes, and the work we're doing. But what if the institution they work in doesn't give them the space or the opportunity to then use that? So we have seen over decades of experience in other fields that a focus only on the training of the individual or training of personnel often is a failed model. It will even sometimes lead to frustration. And the counterpoint of Rhiannon, the very important point that you made, when you provide people with training opportunities, when they feel valued, when they feel that they're invested in by an organization and they gain experiences where they get new ideas and new tools that can help them in what they're doing, that is what we have seen from every single sector, from studies in business and state institutions and others. That is a powerful marker to someone that they're valued. And it is something that also makes them feel valued. But we've also seen evidence it can go the other way. If they take part in trainings which help them to see bad practice in what they're doing and to see the limitations in the systems and performance of their institutions and how things are done today, it can actually contribute to frustration and to people leaving the field. So one of the things we need to do in the PVECV field, in crime prevention, and more broadly as we work to improve our ability to have evidence-based policy and practice, is to also audit our institutions and to look at how fit are our institutions. How do we actually go about designing our policies and our interventions? Do we have steps and processes by which we engage with evidence? How do we gather that evidence? How do we work with communities and stakeholders to make sure that what we're doing are the right types of interventions and practices that fit in that situation, in that context, and with what we're trying to achieve? Do we have instruments and processes in place within our institutions that can also value and recognize the expertise of our practitioners? So sometimes in the way we do evaluation, when you bring in and it's top down with an external expert, external consultant who's doing this, often paid a huge amount. The amount of money that goes into evaluations in many countries, in the few that do it, it's often a lot of resources. And what we have sometimes seen is that practitioners actually have a reaction at times. They don't feel that their expertise and experience are valued in evaluation. So when we're speaking about training and capacity building, Can we also look at fit-for-purpose approaches to evaluation, which facilitate as well on-the-job learning, which facilitate spaces and opportunities for practitioners to themselves reflect and bring forward their experiences, where practitioners who have gained experiences are also given agency and empowered in case assessments, in bringing forward their learning in ways that help them to go through evaluative processes and build their competencies for evaluative thinking and reflecting on practice, but also create horizontal spaces and opportunities of exchange. So looking at auditing our systems and institutions, and then seeing how we can build knowledge management and learning spaces into the work of our own organizations, so that when we train those people and they come back, they're also feeling that they have the opportunities to be using what they have learned. The other component is looking at how we deal with evaluation and learning to build our competencies as a field. So today, for example, when we do evaluations, the reports are quite often limited in how many people they go to. So they may only stick within that institution. They may only go to people of a certain rank or a certain profile. Very often they're not shared broadly, including because, as we've heard in earlier discussions in the forum, people can sometimes be afraid about the possible impact or results of a negative evaluation, and they don't want to share outside their sector, or because they're dealing with sensitive information. But what we have seen in medicine, in development, in business, in humanitarian fields, and many others, is over the last 20 years an increasing move towards what we have also been seeing for the last several years in PVECVE, an increasing move towards trying to create national and regional or sector-wide networks and platforms, be they institutions like the European Union Crime Prevention Network or RAN, or national platforms like Preval, where instead of looking only at evaluation and having it stay within an agency, an institution, or a project, we work to bring together practitioners and institutions and to have a force multiplier effect of learning. If we do an evaluation in one area, how can the rest of us learn from that? And that is also an important part of capacity building, putting in place the systems and institutions which can facilitate learning, exchange, and knowledge management within the field. And it also helps to address what a lot of practitioner organizations have identified as a major barrier or challenge to doing evaluation. And that's that for many civil society organizations, even if the people were to have the training, they very often don't have the time. They're working under such a load of doing our current projects. And then when that one ends, you need to start planning and preparing or already implementing the next. So when we approach this idea of building capacity focused on the individual is key. The individual is a core part of that. But we can fail to understand the reality of context and conditions in which we operate. I don't expect a single doctor to learn every lesson that there is in the field. I want to put in place tools and systems so that I bring those lessons to the fingertips of that doctor so that they can learn it in the way they need to improve their practice. And this is where we've taken some really big steps if you think about compared to 20 years ago in the field. We do have more and more exchanges, case studies. We do have to look, as Lynn Davies reminded us yesterday, and she brought up, okay, you can have a list of 20, 200, 500 best practices, but how do I apply it? When you just label and name this thing as a best practice, how does it help me to understand how to do my work in context? And this brings us also to what Michael Quinn Patton was speaking about yesterday, and many of us in the field, that we really need to look at what we're trying to understand in evaluation, and then how we bring out the learnings from it. And that evaluation is itself, we're not only speaking about training for evaluation and training to build capacity, but evaluation, when done well, is a capacity building tool. Evaluation, when you use facilitative evaluation, developmental evaluation, action-based or empowerment-based evaluation, actually takes this issue of building capacity into the mandate of the evaluation process. and it focuses on strengthening the capacity of practitioners and stakeholders and communities, both for doing evaluation, but also for them engaging and working with the learnings that come out from it. So individual level focus, institution and organizational focus, systems focus, in recognizing that sometimes it's bigger than me and it's bigger than our organization. And what do we need to put in place at a city level, at a national level, at a European or global level to create tools that can help improve our institutional and systems capacity for this work. The other component is then also looking at engaging with those key institutions and stakeholders that input capacities into the field. And by this, I mean donors and policymakers. So in a lot of agencies and organizations, we're sometimes expected to do evaluation as an add-on, and it's still also very often not budgeted. And even if it is budgeted, there may be funds, but not time allocation. Now, some are much better at this, and they've got very well-developed systems. But for many actors, it's this critical aspect of understanding that evaluation is not just an add-on. It's something that you need to invest and put in place the inputs, the resources that are needed for it. We need to have funding for evaluations to be done well. We need to have funding for learning spaces and doing these exactly as the Commission has done through RAN and through the next phase development of the knowledge hubs to see how we do this better. But it means it's important to work at the level of engaging with the funding institutions and engaging with the policymakers to understand what it takes to do evaluation well. And then the second part of that, what it takes to do learning and improvement well. Because it isn't enough to have more evaluation. We also have to look, as has been discussed a number of times in the forum, at how do we better engage and better use the learnings and the results from the evaluation. There's so much more that we could speak to. The one last thought I would like to share in this from another major project supported by the European Commission looking at training and capacity building for adult professionals. One of the things that they flagged from the sports sciences field is that you don't learn football through PowerPoint and lecture. And I share this because a lot of what is often called training in the field is not training. It's information sharing. It's awareness sessions. And that can have a value. But connecting with what Sara said and the feedback that we got from the Indeed Smart Hubs, where people were saying it needs to be hands-on, it needs to be practical, it needs to include, simulation, role-playing, exercises, actually doing evaluative practice, and then receiving coaching and mentoring and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and how. And when we're getting trained in any field, for example, if you're training a doctor, if you're training a police officer, if you're training a mediator, you not only include the training component and the education component, but then you include the practicum, the experience-based, where they are coached and mentored by people with more experience. All of these are some of the elements that need deeper engagement to really look at how to build competency and capacity for evaluation in the field. And to this end, within the Indeed project, we're both working on the development of training manuals and training support packages, one on how to do designing evidence-based evaluation, and the second on how to design interventions and programs using evidence. And we're going to roll out these trainings. We're going to do trainings of trainers on them as well, and then do cascade trainings as Rhiannon is leading in the project. And together with that, complementing the work of RAN and so many other institutions in the field, we're also going to be doing webinars, podcasts, video interviews, learning notes to develop a series of knowledge products that can be useful for people to help us to build our capacity and our engagement and experience with how to do evaluation and how to do evidence-based policy and practice in PVE and CV and de-radicalization fields. Sorry, now I spoke much too much on that one, but I hope complementing the fantastic presentations by Sara and Rhiannon, that brings in some different aspects of evaluation. I'd love to ask also everyone who's with us in this group to share your thoughts and experiences or questions you might have about training and building national capacity for evaluation. As we've been sharing throughout the forum these 2 days, we have the chat space. You can click on the chat, you can click on the questions and answers, and also you can raise your hand, and we have our colleague Patrick who's with us, so if someone wants to ask a question, we can do that as well. Please, Frederick. Frederick, I'm not sure if you wanted to ask a question, but we see your profile, but we don't hear anything coming through at the moment. So you're now muted and now unmuted. I'm afraid we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we hear you. Thank you, Frederick.
Yeah, I'm trying to use some gadget which is not so good, but I was impressed by the presentation from Rhiannon Williams and Sarah Afonso. Really, greetings from Uganda. From East Africa. I'm delighted, and I was extremely very moved by this topic because I work with young people. I'm the founder and director of the African Youth Peace Initiatives, and I have been working with young people for some time now, particularly
Frederick, I'm afraid
countering violent extremism, which is a big challenge in our region. Can you hear me now?
Now we hear you once again, yes.
Yeah, so I've been working with young people, preventing radicalization and countering violent extremism. And we do it through a lot of non-violent communication trainings. But our challenge has been, as you have said, training is a major limitation. We lack support in terms of funding to train the young people. Our region is faced with a lot of violent extremism. You've seen the extremist events that happened in Uganda, the bomb blasts, and all these kind of things, which is still an ongoing challenge for our region. And as you said, Brother Kai, Brand, you said that we need training, but more practical approaches in training. And I strongly support you, but we also need support to be able to engage the national policy issues on PVE, because it's not so much appreciated as a major component to prevent violent extremism. And violent extremism manifests itself in terms of violent communications, drivers, and threats to peace within the localization areas of the communities. So we need practical support to undertake training, especially at the national level, for policymakers to appreciate this whole evaluation and also PVE role in crime prevention. So I think I agree with you, Kai, that we need more training, but we need also funding to do these trainings. So I request that this can be taken forward to see how you can support us to be able to popularize and increase the knowledge on PVE and CVE in terms of preventing radicalization and crime prevention for the young people in our communities and in our region, East and Central Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sarah, Rhiannon, would either of you like to engage with those points?
If I may start, thank you so much, Frederick, for your question, and or for the points you actually raised are important. And I actually, listening to both Kai and Rhiannon, it reminded me of this question that we had when we did a very similar presentation as this one in the Society for Terrorism and Research conference that occurred in Lisbon last July. And we did it for an audience of academics and researchers. And they were very interested in the project and in the approach that we are taking. But actually, one of the first questions that we received after the presentation that we conducted was, okay, but how much is this going to cost us? You know, and we know that many of the challenges that we spoke about today are due to a lack of resources, whether they are monetary, whether they are human resources, or any other type of resources. And so I responded that I do not know how much actually implementing all of this is going to take us, but I know that it will definitely cost us a lot more if we do not do anything about it. And if we continue to not include evaluation in the initiatives and in the work that we continuously do. And so I think that this is very relevant, and that is why I'm bringing it up here, because sometimes a little goes a long way. Of course, many times organizations and even state organizations do not have the resources, or maybe they do have the resources, but they have other matters that they consider are more a priority. Especially in the PVE and CVE field, we see that we still have a lot to learn. It is quite a recent field, unlike other fields such as medicine and even criminology in general. They are a bit older and they have a lot more history. And so maybe the basic issues have been overcome and have been kind of solved in a certain way, in which practitioners and experts in that field feel like they are ready already to give the step forward and include here evaluation, because unfortunately, despite us knowing that evaluation should be included since the very beginning, since the get-go, it is still seen as something secondary because there are many other issues that we are still solving first. And I think that is something that affects especially the PVE and CVE field due to its very recent nature and history as well. And so I think that what I wanted to add here is that a little goes a long way, and sometimes just a small awareness raising session does a lot. A brief training, even though it is not ideal to just provide the practitioners or the people who we are working with one-time training initiatives, at least if we do say something once, or if we do a 3-day training event, that will already give them some sort of basis, and that basis will then allow them to take the first step in what is a very long path towards actually implementing evaluation in this area and developing the knowledge within the PVE and the CVE field. So I just wanted to bring this up because it was very interesting. I was with the resources situation in my mind because I was reminded of that. So I think that especially in countries or in communities and organizations that face these issues in terms of shortage of resources, whatever the reasons might be, I would like to stick with this idea that a little goes a long way, and sometimes just doing what we can is better than doing nothing at all. So that is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Rhiannon, did you want to come in on that as well?
I think Sarah said everything that I was going to say, apart from good luck, Frederick. Well done, doing great. Just carry on doing what you're doing.
I would also really reiterate, I thought it was such an important point you made, Sada, when you were saying, people talk about the cost of it and it will cost. And the reality is we're looking at areas of work that is done over years and often decades. We're looking at areas of work that are constant. These are not issues that are simply going away. And in fact, quite the opposite. Sometimes they're even worsening. So we're talking about areas of continual engagement over extended periods. And if you're doing that in ways that aren't working, or if the interventions and the types of efforts and initiatives we're doing actually make things worse, as they sometimes do, then it costs a lot more. And evaluation is this incredibly fundamental and vital instrument which can allow us to be rigorously learning and testing, challenging if what we're doing is working. and from macro level policies to micro practices. How do you treat people when you're engaging with them in community context? How do we build in respect, participation, opportunities for people in the work that we're doing in ways that actually really address underlying drivers and causes of the problems we're working on? Evaluation is an instrument which actually saves money and allows us to work faster because it allows us to work better. So it increases the likelihood that what we're doing actually can contribute to achieving results. And while I was speaking before about the need to go much beyond training, because I think it is important for us to think about how do we really approach and build capacities of field, I would absolutely echo and support what both Sara and Rhiannon were saying. A little can go a long way. The reality is a really good 2, 3, 4 day training, which can help people, practitioners, think about things in new ways, see the value of new approaches, see how to connect and link things into their work, is part of what will be needed to bring about a shift in how we work in this field. And I would also agree with Rhiannon, both to Frederick, yourself, and Dennis put a question in the questions and answers area. What will national training in Nigeria look like from all the presentations? And I don't know, Rhiannon or Sara, if you have anything you'd like to say to that, but what I would share is, on the one hand, any framework for national trainings should be embedded in national realities and context, and should look at who are the stakeholders, which are the institutions working within that context, what are their mandates and their capabilities. But I would also encourage that it should be based upon an evaluation, because Nigeria is a primary example where you see a lot of the policies being pursued now by police and national security actors actually are direct factors escalating and contributing to terrorism, radicalization, and violent extremism. So rather than helping to solve, mitigate, or reduce, they are in many cases part of the fuel and the gasoline on the fire that is escalating it. So in that case, training should address both the response institutions and the stakeholders and actors and the various levels of training and promotion within that context, but it should also be an instrument based upon evaluation and understanding of the context and what's happening to help us look at how to find better responses. We have some more points in the chat, which I'm going to look to in a moment, but Sara, Rhiannon, would you have any reflections on what national training systems might look like in Nigeria or other countries based upon your own experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I would just highlight here a need that was talked about a lot in the research that we conducted, and I have already mentioned, you just mentioned it, Kai, that is really tailoring everything that we do. So we know that working in PVE and CVE, there is no such thing as one size fits all. So what we are discussing here might work in specific countries, but even within the Indeed project, the results of the project that we are doing and the work that we are conducting will be different in practice. And so looking at other countries that are even outside the European scope, I would say that the reality would even be more different. So the first step for all sorts of training at national levels should start, as Kai was saying, with a national level needs assessment to really understand what is necessary, because it is going to be very different, particularly from the countries that are within the project, but also from other countries in the region. So no such thing as one size fits all. And the key that I would take here and that was highlighted is really this need to create trainings that are adequately tailored to previously and adequately identified needs of all of those who are involved. And this here will also depend on the target groups that will be taught and will be covered by this training. So just what I would highlight.
Yeah, really great points. And I'd add to it that it is actually an opportunity to think about a national level training initiative if it's going to go in a direction where you could take a more holistic approach to training any of your NGO or public service staff who are going to be in some way in contact with this issue, and then find synergies between those departments or organizations or whatever it is, and thereby make it even more effective on the ground and more resource saving at the top. So that trying to look at it the other way as a really good starting point, a really good, even if it's small, like Sarah says, a really good beginning is would be a positive approach.
One thing we should actually share with everyone, which I think we haven't spoken to enough, I mentioned it in passing, but when you're asking how can we develop trainings like this in different contexts, or how can we develop national trainings, part of the work we're doing in Indeed is that we are creating a training support package. And the training support package will be available in 10 languages, including English and French. It will include manuals for training for designing evidence-based evaluation and training for designing practices using evidence. And in the training support packages, it has the manuals, but it will also have a broad package of materials that can be helpful for trainers and participants. There will be video interviews, there will be case studies, there will be toolkits and handbooks, and there are materials that can be used by anyone, anywhere, to at least gain some insight on key issues in evidence-based evaluation and evidence-based policy and practice. And then you can take those and tailor them to your specific contexts. And in the training support packages, it will also include guidance on that. For example, we have seen from practitioners the emphasis that case studies can be very important, and that people like to use case learning in their approaches. And one of the recommendations in the training support package is, if using the package, to also look at local or national cases that you can use for that learning so that you contextualize it. There will also be a significant online resource hub and library with great articles and publications and various tools that have been developed to help build up expertise on evaluation. And those are available for any trainer, any practitioner to engage with, in case that can help support in your different local or national context. All right. I think we've had a very full discussion. I would like to leave some space in case there are any other questions that any of the participants or colleagues joining with us would like to share. But at the same time, as people think of that, perhaps just to ask Sara and Rhiannon as well, we've all been involved in this project in Indeed over the last 2 years, and have worked in different ways in training. If you were to reflect yourself and to try and identify from everything you've done, what do you feel are 2 or 3 recommendations or 2 or 3 areas that are important for us to go forward and to improve training and capacity building for evidence-based evaluation in the field? What would be some of your key recommendations?
Yes, I don't know. I'll just go first, I guess. Well, in the presentation that we did, there were already some recommendations, and I will just go a bit further by saying that the most important thing is really making sure that the training or the capacity building is really made available for everyone, because with the practitioners that we spoke to, it was quite interesting to see the very low level of knowledge that practitioners actually have in this area, especially in terms of evaluation. And so it is very important going forward to ensure in any way, shape, or form that this training is to be made available and made accessible for everyone. Because as you said, Kai, and Rhiannon also said, many times practitioners do not have the time to think about these things. Because they have other issues in their minds. Because, for example, the matter that Rhiannon explained about probation officers who have to think about how to solve these very basic issues on cases that they are dealing with right now. They do not have the time or they do not have the space in their minds to think about these matters of evaluation. So besides being made available, it should be also accessible. So we know that we must conduct a very structured and well-tailored capacity building initiative for the practitioners in order to really build their skills and their competences in this field. However, we also must have into consideration that many times, as was already discussed, practitioners are overworked and they do not really have the time and they do not have the capacity to dedicate to these types of trainings. So it should be something really throughout time. And I will also highlight, and this is my last point to highlight, continuous training. So we do not have to teach everyone everything all at once. It does not have to be one single training initiative that is given to practitioners and then we never mention it again. It has to be something continuous throughout their whole career, especially as this is a field that is ever changing and that new ideas are coming every single day. And so we should have that into consideration. So these are just my main points.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. Rhiannon?
Yes, it's a really good question. And I would add to Sarah's points, the really crucial thing that you said also, Kai, very well, is that is the issue of agency, not just training people. We know this also. In fact, I would have, I guess, called it a little bit change management within the system. It's knowing that once we have 5 or 6 people from Bremen Prison Probation Service going back with more knowledge about how they implement evaluation, how they design evaluation initiatives. I don't want to be seen as some kind of troublemaker then in situ and then going up to people and trying to challenge the things they do. And we'd rather that it was all seen positively and within the context of improving their work and their working life. So that's a really important consideration for us. We have thought about that already, and let's see how we approach it. And the second point is some sort of, I heard this mentioned in quite a lot of the main sessions, that evaluation has nothing to do with the funding. Well, in most people's mind, it does. So this conscious uncoupling of evaluation from performance and money is, I think, really fundamental. I mean, it still slightly freaks me out doing evaluation, but I know now that it is a super effective tool and has really positive benefits, and it does not, and I also, I know how to share that with people, but that won't be the first thought in everybody's minds. And I think we need to acknowledge and prepare for that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. You both inspired me with a lot of what you were saying. One was this idea of a focus on change management. We mentioned in one of our sessions yesterday that quite often in the evaluation field of PVE, CVE, it comes from a specific culture and approach to evaluation where the endpoint is seen as the report. Whereas in other sectors, the endpoint, the report and the evaluation are seen as the beginning, and the endpoint is the impacted change. It's when you then go into change management. It's very interesting that profoundly few evaluators in the PVE, CVE field have been exposed to or have any background or have been trained themselves in doing change management. That's a gap. So when we're looking at building capacity and competency, also change management is an important component and looking at how we implement it. Also, I think putting into place things like a community of practice, and that's part of what many different steps in recent years have done. EUCPN, EFOS, RAN, but also the Indeed project itself with creating smart hubs. It's creating those spaces where we come together as practitioners, and we can do this in our different communities and countries, and we begin discussing and recognizing together what changes need to be made, what needs to improve, and that includes calls for training and bringing that into the work. You mentioned, Rhiannon, funding, and where we can take steps that can help us as practitioners is to actually build evaluation into our proposals and into our requests, whether they're to ministries or whether they're to donors. And if you make the argument for it, then the ministry's donors will often understand that. If you make the argument for how this helps to make the work better and why it's necessary. And what we have also begun doing with many of our projects around the world in international context is building into the funding proposals also training to support capacity building on evaluation. So when you're designing a project, when you're designing an initiative, you can have agency and to think, how can we build training into this, or how can we build evaluation into this? I would also want to share that in addition to the materials we're developing for in-person, live, on-site trainings, we're also developing in the Indeed project online self-paced courses, which you can take from anywhere in the world, and which can help to strengthen and support your own experience and expertise. And there's also courses made available by others. There's a very basic course on evaluation by the United States Institute for Peace and other actors. But what I would reflect is in the work on evidence-based evaluation, it's a little different than the traditional project management M&E training, monitoring and evaluation training, that a lot of us have been exposed to from the 90s onwards. Those trainings are very important and they can help for good practice. But what we're trying to do is to evolve the field further and to look deeper at how to do evaluation, which helps us to really understand what works, what doesn't, how and why, and then how we as practitioners, as policymakers, and as a field can bring that learning in to improve our policy and our practice. We've had a rich discussion and also made more so by the contributions and the questions of people in the chat and in the questions. Thank you so much for that. If you'd like to continue to receive information about the work being done in the Indeed project on training and evaluation, and also training opportunities, both in person and online, you can visit the Indeed project website. We're going to send a link out to everyone who's taking part in the forum. And you can also subscribe to the Indeed newsletter, and you'll receive their information and updates. The Indeed project is also on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, and many different platforms I don't use. But for whoever does, you can find it there and get regular updates. I'd like to just take this opportunity to say thank you to Sara and Rhiannon for sharing with us from the work that you're doing and from your own experiences. Thank you to everyone who has joined us for this session. We are going to have the break now, and then we are starting again in the final series of sessions in the Indeed forum. There's one session 10 on evaluation of exit programs, and it has an incredible group of people that are working in exit programs and people that are working with concrete experience and having done evaluation of exit programs. That's going to be a very interesting session for everyone who would like to join. There's also a really quite right at the heart of what we're talking about, Indeed, session on designing evidence-based policy. So a lot of the forum so far has been looking at practice, has been looking at how to do evaluation. And we did have a session yesterday on evaluating strategies and action plans. But this session is going to have us focus on designing evidence-based policy and how to use evidence to design local and national strategies. So I think that one will be very interesting and important. The last session, they're all in parallel, but the third of them is on the role of regional and national networks and platforms as tools for learning and improving practice. And we have an amazing project, which is actually funded by the German government, Preval, which brings together actors in Germany, key sectors and institutions, and helps as a national platform for them to share experiences and to do evaluation and to work to really understand and see how to improve the field. We're also going to be joined there by a colleague from the European Union Crime Prevention Network, which itself is a huge platform within Europe to help consolidate and develop expertise, knowledge in crime prevention. And you can hear from their model and their experiences. And there's a possibility we will also be joined by a colleague from the Violence Prevention Network and RAND, the Radicalization Awareness Network in Europe. And these three colleagues who will also be joined by Martin Snowden, a senior commander in the British Police, and now with Centric at Sheffield University. They will be looking at how national and regional platforms can help us as practitioners, as policymakers, as a field to be doing what we do better and improving evidence-based prevention and countering of violent extremism and de-radicalization. So thank you to everyone who has taken part in this session. And the next session begins at 1600 Central European time. That's 1600 Brussels time. For those joining from anywhere else in the world who need to find that time zone, you can join it by clicking on the schedule and going to the session you want. But in the meantime, you can also go into the lobby and connect and speak with anyone you'd like to further from this forum. Thank you very much for the session.